The tall hedges surrounding the Sterling estate in Connecticut gave the illusion of perfection. Beyond the iron gate stood a grand white mansion with high windows and a pristine garden, where even the grass seemed manicured to the millimeter. Jackson Sterling, the man behind the fortune, had become a symbol of success, his name synonymous with elegance, discipline, and vision. His wife, Vanessa, graced social events with polished charm, her beauty matched only by her aloofness. Together, they represented what many aspired to be, a family that had it all. Inside the mansion, everything gleamed with affluence. Chandeliers shimmered above marble floors, and art lined the hallways like a curated gallery. 2 children, Ava and Noah, completed the image. Ava, 9, carried herself with quiet composure, always well-dressed and well-mannered. Noah, 7, was more expressive but just as presentable, offering shy smiles and clinging to his sister's side like a shadow. When Carla Mendez stepped into the Sterling household for the first time, it was early September. At 38 years old, she had worked for several families, always dependable and thorough. Her references were impeccable, and she had a reputation for being discreet yet attentive. The Sterlings hired her as their new maid without much ceremony. Vanessa simply reviewed her resume and gave a curt nod. Her first week was a blur of routines. Breakfast served by 6:30 in the morning. Linens replaced every Tuesday and Saturday. The children were picked up by a driver and returned in the afternoon, where they disappeared into their rooms or the television room while the parents attended charity galas or closed deals via speakerphone in separate offices. But even amidst the routines, Carla noticed something unsettling. At night, when she passed by the hallway to lock the windows or adjust the thermostat, soft sounds would emerge from behind the children's door. Not loud sobs, just muffled crying, the kind that seemed too practiced for comfort. One night, she paused just long enough to hear a whimper, followed by a sniffle, then silence again. She dismissed it the first time, assuming a nightmare or a bad day at school. But the second night, and then the third, the same faint crying returned. Each time, she was stopped by the door, unsure if she should knock. But the voice inside her said no, this was not her place. During the day, nothing seemed off. The children were polite and quiet, responding when spoken to, never rude, never disruptive. Ava would sometimes curl up with a book near the fireplace, while Noah toyed with puzzles but never completed them. They seemed obedient to a fault, as though constantly measuring their behavior. The parents, however, were mostly absent. Vanessa moved to the house like a ghost in high heels, always headed somewhere. Jackson was worse. He often wasn't there at all, and when he was, his voice echoed through conference calls more than it did through conversations with his children. Carla saw them together in the same room only twice that week, once during a formal dinner with guests, and another time briefly in the morning as they passed by each other with travel mugs in hand. Still, nothing concrete stood out, nothing Carla could name as wrong. The mansion functioned like a well-oiled machine, but it was as if the warmth had been drained from its walls. Everything was too polished, too rehearsed. Even the children's laughter, when it came, felt like it belonged to someone else. One afternoon, as Carla cleaned the children's bathroom, she found a towel damp on the floor, unusual for Ava, who was tidy to a fault. Next to it, a small drawing scribbled in pencil had been left on the counter. It showed a house neat and square, with 2 small stick figures in a corner and no one else around. Carla picked it up, stared for a moment, then folded it gently and set it aside. She didn't say anything. Not yet. But something about the picture, about the sadness in Ava's eyes and the way Noah sometimes reached out as if to hold someone's hand only to pull back, began to nest in her mind. The mansion had no creaking doors, no sinister basements. There were no ghosts or curses. But at night, it held its breath, and so did the children. That silence spoke louder than any scream. And Carla, though new and unsure, began to listen. From the outside, the Sterling estate followed the same rhythm each day. Landscapers trimmed the hedges in symmetrical patterns. Deliveries were placed precisely at the back door, and the household staff performed their duties with quiet efficiency. Carla quickly learned the hierarchy of the home, who to speak to, what to avoid, and which corners of the house were off-limits unless explicitly directed otherwise. But inside the structured perfection, the atmosphere remained fragile like glass under tension. It wasn't something visible. It was something she could feel. The children, Ava and Noah, had grown used to watching others pass them by. Carla observed it first during dinner preparations. She would set the table, polishing each piece of silverware, while the children sat at the breakfast nook off the kitchen. They never asked questions, never complained. They waited in silence until someone told them what to do next. One evening, as Carla wiped the marble counter, she heard Ava whisper, "Will it be just us again tonight?" Noah didn't answer. He just lowered his eyes and swung his legs under the bench. It was a small comment, but it stuck. The next few days gave Carla more to think about. Each afternoon, when the children returned from school, they walked through the door as if entering a museum. Their footsteps were soft, deliberate, almost apologetic. Carla, who had expected bursts of energy and chatter, instead saw two small bodies settle quickly into silence. They dropped their backpacks by the door and moved without being told. To the living room, the study, the TV room. Anywhere but near their parents. On a Thursday afternoon, the children returned early. Carla was in the hallway dusting a set of framed awards when she heard the front door open. Their driver, Davis, looked mildly confused. "Half day at school," he said in passing, before heading back outside. Ava and Noah stood by the door for a long moment before Ava asked, "Should we go to the study?" Noah nodded, and they quietly walked away. Carla hesitated. Something about their tone, it wasn't curiosity. It was caution, the kind children use when navigating unwelcome terrain. Later that evening, Carla found herself folding linens in the laundry room when she heard muffled voices coming from the office across the hall. Mr. Sterling was on a call, pacing, as always. His voice rose sharply. "I told you I don't have time for this right now. Vanessa, let's finish this deal first, and then we'll worry about the rest." The door closed with a muted thud. Carla resumed folding, but now the rhythm of her work was disrupted by the growing awareness of how the family communicated. Not with one another, but around one another. The next day, as she cleared the kitchen after breakfast, Carla noticed Ava sitting alone at the long dining table. Her cereal bowl was untouched, spoon idle in her hand. "Are you not hungry today, Ava?" Carla asked gently. The girl gave a small shake of her head. "Mom said we're going to Grandma's next weekend, but I don't think she remembered. She says a lot of things." Carla kept her expression neutral, but something about Ava's flat tone, the resignation behind the words, made her chest tighten. That afternoon, Carla asked Mrs. Sterling if the children would need special clothes for their visit. Vanessa looked up from her tablet. "Visit?" she repeated, then blinked. "Oh, right. I think I mentioned that. No, cancel that." Something came up. She waved her hand as if dismissing a fly, and Carla nodded, hiding her dismay. On Saturday, something else caught Carla's attention. She walked past the children's playroom, a room filled with toys, books, and expensive entertainment systems. But the lights were off. She peered inside and saw both Ava and Noah curled up on the floor, using a single blanket. They weren't playing. They were just sitting close, whispering. Carla didn't intrude, but she stood outside the door for a moment longer than she meant to. She expected the sound of a television or the clatter of toys. Instead, there was only the whisper of Ava's voice. "Do you think they forgot we're here again?" Noah didn't answer. He simply rested his head on her shoulder. That night, Carla sat in the staff kitchen with Helena, the cook, and brought up the children casually. "They seem very quiet," she offered. Helena gave a noncommittal shrug. "They've always been that way. It's just how they are." But her voice lacked conviction. Carla didn't press, though she noticed how quickly Helena changed the subject. The turning point came unexpectedly the following Monday. While organizing the bookshelves in the family library, Carla came across a stack of papers Ava had left behind. Sheets filled with carefully drawn calendars and notes, each day marked with questions. Was she read to us? Will we have dinner? Can we go to the park? Next to most of them were sad faces or simple crosses. Carla flipped through page after page, each one more heartbreaking in its innocence. These weren't schedules. They were quiet pleas documented with child's hope and slowly abandoned with a child's disappointment. That evening, Carla lingered longer in the hallway than she usually would. She heard Jackson's voice from the other room, clear, loud, full of purpose. The sterling name doesn't falter. We deliver. We close. Carla wondered if he realized how rarely he spoke that way to his children. Later, when she passed by their room, the door was ajar. Ava sat at her desk, scribbling. Noah was on the floor with building blocks, constructing a tower without speaking. They didn't see her, but she saw them, and for the first time, she saw what had been hiding in plain sight. This wasn't just a case of busy parents. This was deeper, a void filled with silence, where love should have lived. The children weren't waiting for affection as a reward. They were surviving in its absence. Carla went to her own room that night and lay awake for hours. She didn't cry. She wasn't even angry. But something inside her had shifted. This house, for all its beauty, was starving for connection, and she couldn't unsee it anymore. By the second week, Carla had adopted a quiet routine of her own, one that allowed her to remain unnoticed while observing everything. The Sterling mansion offered little in terms of warmth, but plenty in subtle details. The more Carla paid attention, the more apparent it became. Ava and Noah were not simply quiet children. They were cautious. They moved through their days with a watchfulness that felt rehearsed, as if they had learned through experience to predict disappointment. Carla had seen guarded behavior before, in children raised by relatives, in homes fractured by grief or addiction. But the Sterlings did not fit those molds. Their wealth concealed everything, like a well-pressed curtain. Yet the signs were there in the way Ava flinched at sudden movements or how Noah scanned the room before speaking, as though gauging the safety of the moment. One evening, just after the sun had set, Carla was placing clean sheets in the hallway linen closet when she noticed a sliver of light coming from beneath the children's door. She paused, then knocked gently. No answer. She knocked again, then slowly opened the door. Inside, Ava sat on the edge of her bed with her knees pulled to her chest, rocking slightly. Noah had burrowed under a blanket, his small hands clutching its edge. Carla entered softly. "Everything all right?" she asked, keeping her voice low. Ava looked up. "Can you stay for a bit?" she asked. Carla hesitated. It was not part of her job, strictly speaking, but she nodded. She sat on the floor between their beds. For a few moments, no one spoke. Then Noah peeked out from under blanket. "I don't like when it's quiet," he whispered. Carla tilted her head. "Why not?" He shrugged, but Ava answered instead. "Because when it's quiet, no one remembers us." Carla said nothing, unsure how to respond without breaking into pieces. Later that night, as she returned to her quarters, Carla passed by a hallway bookshelf and noticed something odd. One of the books, an old collection of classic children's stories, was missing. The next morning, she found it in Ava's backpack. It had a small note tucked inside. "Read this one next." There was no name, no drawing, just that simple sentence written in Ava's neat cursive. During lunch on Saturday, Carla offered to sit with the children while they ate. Helena, the cook, had prepared sandwiches and fruit, but neither Ava nor Noah seemed interested. They picked at their food until Carla asked, "Do you have a favorite meal?" Noah answered quickly, "Mac and cheese, the kind with the crunchy top." Carla smiled. "Like the one your grandma used to make?" He blinked. "How did you know?" "I didn't," she said. "Lucky guess." Ava, for the first time, gave a tiny smile. Carla began collecting small truths, each one like a piece of a larger puzzle. Noah hated thunder but would never cry. Ava loved music but never played the piano in the main room. Only the little keyboard in the attic, the one no one else knew about. They craved structure, not because they were disciplined, but because it gave them a sense of presence. Someone had thought about their schedule. Someone had remembered them. On a rainy afternoon, Carla found Ava sketching quietly in the sunroom. "What are you drawing?" she asked. "Rooms," Ava replied. "I like drawing houses." Carla peered over her shoulder. The paper showed a series of rectangular spaces, neat, organized, labeled. "This one's my room," Ava explained, pointing to a small box in the corner. "And this is Noah's. And this is the hallway." Carla nodded. "What about this empty one?" Ava paused. "That's the guest room," she said after a moment. "But no one ever stays there." The drawing was precise, measured, but there was no figure in any of the rooms, just spaces. Carla said nothing and let Ava return to her sketching. That evening, Noah brought her a puzzle box. "Can you help me?" he asked. It was a 1,000-piece image of a mountain lake. They sat on the carpet near the fireplace and worked for an hour in silence. As the border pieces came together, Noah said, "Mom used to help, but she doesn't like puzzles anymore." "Why not?" Carla asked gently. "She says they take too long." Carla looked at the half-finished edge. "But they're more fun when you don't rush." Noah looked up at her with eyes too serious for a 7-year-old. "That's what I think too." The pieces continued to fall into place, both the puzzle on the floor and the one forming in Carla's mind. The children had built a world where emotions were not expressed but hinted, where questions were not asked directly, because answers rarely came. One night, Ava knocked on Carla's door after bedtime. She stood in her pajamas, holding a small flashlight and a blanket. "Can I just sit in here for a while?" she asked. Carla nodded. Ava curled up on the carpet and said nothing more. After about 20 minutes, she stood up, thanked Carla quietly, and left. The next day, when Carla made the beds, she found a note under Ava's pillow. It read, "Thank you for being here. By now." Carla had stopped trying to understand the children through what they said. It was through what they did not say that the truth unfolded. At the end of the 3rd week, Carla stood by the window as Noah played in the garden. He chased a butterfly, but never smiled. She saw Mrs. Sterling through the glass, sitting on a lounge chair, her face buried in a phone. At one point, Noah ran toward her, but she held up a hand without looking. He stopped, turned, and walked back toward the hedges. That evening, Carla found Noah sitting at the bottom of the staircase. "Did something happen?" she asked. He shook his head. "I just wanted to tell her the butterfly landed on my arm." "Did it?" "Yeah, for a second." Carla knelt beside him. "You can tell me next time." Noah nodded. "But it's not the same." Carla didn't argue. He was right. The children didn't need rescuing. They needed remembering. They needed to matter in someone's day, not just exist in it. And slowly, piece by piece, Carla began to matter back. Not as a hero, not as a replacement, but as someone who saw them fully, without looking past them. The silence of the Sterling household had become a second skin to Carla. It was no longer surprising to walk past the kitchen and see 2 untouched lunch boxes on the counter at 3 o'clock in the afternoon, or to find Ava reading quietly on the staircase instead of in her bedroom. The children no longer flinched when Carla entered a room. In fact, they often seemed to breathe easier in her presence. She responded with small gestures, folded napkins in the shapes of animals, fresh fruit slices arranged in smiley faces, simple things that acknowledged their existence. But beneath those gestures grew a quiet storm. One morning, while cleaning the upstairs hallway, Carla overheard Noah calling out faintly from his room. When she entered, he was sitting up in bed, his face pale and sweat dampening his hair. "My stomach hurts," he murmured. Carla touched his forehead. He was burning up. She alerted Mrs. Sterling, who was in the middle of a virtual styling session in her dressing room. Carla waited at the doorway as Vanessa turned from the screen and glanced over her shoulder. "He's sick," Carla said. "He needs rest, fluids, maybe a doctor." Vanessa rolled her eyes, not in irritation, but in exhaustion. "He gets like that when he's anxious. Let him sleep it off. I'll call someone later." Carla hesitated. "He has a fever." Vanessa sighed, waved her hand dismissively, and returned to her screen. "Just keep him in bed. We'll check again tomorrow." The door clicked shut before Carla could say anything more. Back in Noah's room, she brought a damp cloth, offered sips of water, and stayed by his side until he fell asleep. She watched his small chest rise and fall under the sheets, thinking of all the times she had seen children feign illness to get attention. But this wasn't that. This was real, and it was being ignored. Later that week, she noticed Ava rubbing her shoulder repeatedly. "Did you hurt yourself?" Carla asked. Ava shook her head, but she avoided eye contact. Did something happen at school? No, I just sleep weird sometimes. But Carla had changed her sheets that morning and remembered the pillow on the floor, the blanket half off the mattress. Ava had likely rolled out of bed without waking anyone, and if she cried out, no one came. That thought stayed with Carla for the rest of the day. The final nudge came one Friday evening. Mr. Sterling had returned from a business trip, his suitcase still by the door. Ava and Noah had waited quietly in the hallway for nearly an hour, sitting cross-legged, hoping to greet him. When he finally entered, he walked past them without a word, phoned his ear. He gave Carla a nod, but never looked down. That night, as she tucked him in, neither child spoke. The next morning, Carla made a decision. She found Vanessa on the patio, flipping through a glossy magazine with mimosa in hand. Carla approached carefully. "Excuse me, Mrs. Sterling. May I speak with you for a moment?" Vanessa lowered her sunglasses. "Yes." Carla took a breath. "I've noticed Ava and Noah seem emotionally withdrawn. They often don't eat properly. They're alone most of the time. And they're fine," Vanessa interrupted, not unkindly but firmly. "They're just shy. Ava's always been quiet and Noah's sensitive. You don't need to worry. I think they might need a little more attention." Vanessa's tone sharpened slightly. "Are you saying I'm not parenting correctly?" "No, ma'am," Carla replied calmly. "I'm only sharing what I've observed. I care about their well-being." Vanessa exhaled. "It's been a difficult year. Jackson's work, my obligations to travel were all stretched, but they're not neglected. They have everything they need." Carla didn't argue. Sometimes what children need most isn't a thing. There was a long silence. Vanessa stared at the pool, then spoke softly. "You're new here, Carla. You're not paid to analyze the family." "No, ma'am," Carla said again. "I'm just trying to help." Vanessa nodded once, without looking at her, then returned to her magazine. The conversation was over. The following days were tense. Carla wasn't reprimanded, but a distance formed between her and the parents. She was given fewer tasks inside the children's quarters and redirected more toward housekeeping. Still, she remained close to Ava and Noah whenever she could. One afternoon, while helping Noah build a paper rocket, Carla asked gently, "Do you talk to your mom and dad about your day?" Noah shrugged. "Sometimes, but they forget what I say." "What do you mean?" "Like when I told Mom I had a field trip next week. She said she'd come, but then she had a lunch thing." Carla looked at him. "Did she apologize?" Noah thought. "She said she was busy. That's kind of like sorry, I guess." The next morning, Carla noticed something new. Ava had placed a sticky note on her nightstand. In tiny letters it read, "Remember to be small. Small things don't get in the way." Carla didn't touch it. She just sat on the bed for a moment, absorbing the weight of that sentence. That night, she considered reaching out to a guidance counselor at the children's school or calling a child welfare professional. But she hesitated. The Sterling name carried weight, and Carla was a maid, not a social worker. Any misstep could get her fired, and then she'd be leaving Ava and Noah without the only steady adult presence in their life. Instead, she took smaller steps. She asked Ava to show her the keyboard in the attic. She offered to walk Noah to the school car in the mornings. She asked him questions and waited patiently for answers. Sometimes they came. Sometimes they didn't. But the children knew at least that someone was listening. One night, as Carla turned off the lights in the hallway, she heard footsteps behind her. It was Ava holding a small photo frame. This was from when we went to the lake. Ava said, "Before Mom got her new job." Carla looked at the photo. It was the four of them, Mr. and Mrs. Sterling smiling under the sun, Ava in a blue swimsuit, Noah with a fishing rod. "We laughed a lot back then," Ava said. "I think they remember that too. Just not every day." Carla crouched to her level. "Thank you for showing me." Ava nodded and walked back to her room. The frame clutched against her chest. That night, Carla sat in the staff lounge with a cup of tea in her hand, staring at nothing. She had tried speaking up. It hadn't changed much. But the act itself, that quiet attempt, was a seed. One that, perhaps, might grow when the Sterlings were ready to notice. Until then, Carla remained present, not to fix everything, just to make sure Ava and Noah didn't forget what it felt like to be seen. It was a Thursday evening when the atmosphere in the Sterling household shifted. Rain tapped softly against the windows, a light drizzle that had started at sunset and continued into the night. The house was unusually quiet. Mr. Sterling was away again, this time in Boston, and Mrs. Sterling had gone to a charity gala, leaving before dinner and not expected back until late. The children had eaten with Carla, who had made grilled cheese sandwiches and tomato soup, comfort food that neither Ava nor Noah commented on, but both finished without hesitation. After dinner, Carla helped them into their pajamas and read a short chapter from a fantasy book they had started the week before. Ava leaned against her shoulder. Noah curled beside them on the bed. When the last line was read, Carla closed the book gently. "Will you stay for a bit?" Noah asked. "Just until you fall asleep," Carla promised. But sleep didn't come easily that night. Ava shifted restlessly under her covers, and Noah kept glancing at the window, though the curtains were drawn. Carla sat in the armchair between their beds, the book resting on her lap. She didn't speak, just waited, her presence steady and quiet. Eventually, Ava's breathing evened out, and Carla stood to leave. But as she reached the door, a soft voice stopped her. "Carla?" It was Noah. She turned. He was sitting up now, his knees pulled to his chest. "I had that dream again," he said. Carla walked back to his bed and knelt beside it. "Do you want to talk about it?" Noah looked down at the blanket. "I'm in the car. It's parked somewhere. I don't know where. And I'm waiting. The sky is dark, and I keep looking at the door, but no one comes back." Carla kept her voice calm. "Do you know who you're waiting for?" He shook his head. "I think everyone." She sat beside him and placed a hand on his back. He trembled slightly. "And what happens next in the dream?" Noah hesitated. "Nothing. I just wait. I keep hoping someone will come, but they never do. And then I wake up." Carla stayed with him a while longer, running her hand gently across his back until the tension in his shoulders eased. When he finally lay down again, she covered him carefully and whispered, "I'm here now. You're not alone." He didn't answer, but his breathing slowed. Carla remained seated until he fell asleep, then quietly stepped out into the hallway. She stood there in the dim light for a long moment, her mind replaying his words. The dream wasn't complicated. It wasn't surreal. It was painfully real, a child's distilled fear of being forgotten. Later that night, after finishing her final tasks, Carla passed by the children's room one last time before going to bed. As she approached, she noticed the door was slightly ajar. A soft rustling sound came from inside. She opened it gently. Ava was asleep, but Noah was sitting on the floor near the window, curled into a ball. "Noah," she whispered. He turned slowly, eyes wide but not surprised. "I couldn't sleep." "Why didn't you call me?" He shrugged. "I didn't want to be a bother." Carla crossed the room and sat down beside him. The rain had stopped, and only the soft hum of wind filled the air. She looked at him carefully. "You're never a bother," she said. He nodded but didn't speak. After a pause, he whispered, "Sometimes I wonder if we would notice if they were gone." Carla looked at him, startled. "What do you mean?" He picked at the edge of his pajama sleeve. "Like, what if they just left? I think Ava would be okay, but I don't know if I would." Carla's voice caught in her throat. She steadied it. "They're still your parents." "I know," he said, "but sometimes it feels like they don't want to be." She didn't have an answer. Instead, she reached out and gently touched his shoulder. Noah looked up at her. "I don't want to be invisible forever." "You're not," she said. "You're seen. I see you. Ava sees you. And we're not going anywhere." He nodded, and finally, for the first time in what felt like days, a tear rolled down his cheek. He wiped it quickly, embarrassed, but Carla didn't look away. She let him cry in silence, his small shoulders trembling as the weight of everything he carried finally spilled out in the dark. Eventually, Carla lifted him gently and helped him back to bed. She tucked him in, sat beside him until his breathing became slow and steady, and only then allowed herself to leave the room. The next morning, she found Ava already awake, seated at the breakfast nook, her arms wrapped around a mug of warm milk. "Did you hear him last night?" Carla asked softly. Ava nodded. "He has that dream a lot," she said. "He never tells Mom." "Why not?" "Because she always says it's just a dream, like it doesn't matter." Carla poured herself some tea and sat across from her. "But it matters," Ava said, "because it's not about monsters or weird stuff. It's about being forgotten. And that's worse." Carla reached across the table and gently placed her hand over Ava's. "You're not forgotten." Ava didn't cry. She only nodded, slowly, as if absorbing the words carefully so they wouldn't slip away later. That day passed quietly. The children were subdued but calm. Noah drew quietly at the table, while Ava reread the same book for the third time. Carla remained close, not hovering but nearby, present enough to be counted. Late in the afternoon, Mrs. Sterling returned. She didn't ask about the children. She didn't notice Noah's red-rimmed eyes or Ava's unusual stillness. She breezed past Carla with a distracted greeting and vanished into her dressing room. Mr. Sterling called that evening, but did not ask to speak to the kids. As Carla tucked them in that night, Noah held her hand a little longer. "Can we read the chapter again tomorrow?" he asked. "Yes," Carla said. "We can read it as many times as you want." He smiled, and for the first time in days, it reached his eyes. That moment, simple, small, quiet, was a shift, not in the household, not in the parents, but in the children's hearts. They had someone now who stayed, someone who listened, someone who noticed when they whispered in the dark. And from that night on, they whispered a little louder. The weekend began with a mild wind brushing through the trees, carrying the scent of late autumn leaves. The Sterling mansion, despite its grandeur, felt heavy with stillness. It was Saturday morning, and for once, both parents were home. Jackson was locked in his office behind thick wooden doors, pacing and speaking into a headset, his voice a low but steady hum of business jargon. Vanessa remained in the sunroom, her eyes flicking between her phone and a stack of design magazines, her posture elegant but rigid, like someone posing rather than resting. Carla moved quietly through the house, her ears tuned not to the adults but to the spaces in between. She found Ava in the formal living room, sitting on the edge of the leather couch with children's encyclopedia open on her lap. Her eyes skimmed the pages, but she didn't seem to be absorbing the content. When Carla approached, Ava glanced up, then closed the book with careful precision. "Did you know whales can sing to each other across oceans?" she asked. Carla smiled. "I did, but I haven't heard it in a while." "I wish people could do that," Ava said. "Sing when they're far away. Then maybe Dad would remember." Carla sat beside her, but said nothing. She didn't have to. Ava had already said everything. Later, while sorting laundry upstairs, Carla found a small journal tucked beneath a pile of Ava's clothes. She didn't mean to read it. She only noticed a page half opened, the edge of a drawing visible. Curiosity tugged at her. She gently opened the page. It was a list, neatly written and numbered. Things I like about Carla. She listens. She knows how to fold my shirts without making them stiff. She asks questions that don't have wrong answers. She reads the boring parts of books with the same voice as the fun parts. She doesn't forget things I tell her. Carla's chest tightened. She closed the journal and returned it exactly as she found it. Downstairs, Noah was at the kitchen counter building a tower of apple slices. Carla watched for a moment before asking, "What's the tallest thing you've ever built?" He considered it. "I made a tower once that reached the bottom of the microwave. And did it fall?" "Eventually," he said. "Everything does." Carla pulled up a chair. "Do you want to build one that lasts longer?" He shook his head. "No, it's more fun to build than to keep." There was something profound in the way he said it, like he had learned not to be too attached to permanence, not because of toys or games, but because of people. The next day, the children were unusually quiet. At first, Carla thought it was tiredness, but after lunch, Ava approached her with a question. "Do you know what day it is?" Carla paused. Sunday? No, Ava said. I mean the date. Carla thought. The 12th? Ava nodded. Last year, on this day, we made pancakes. With Mom. She let me stir and got batter on her nose. That sounds fun, Carla said. She hasn't cooked with us since, Ava replied. I don't think she remembers. Carla knelt beside her. Did you remind her? Ava looked away. No, she'd probably say she's busy. The conversation hung in the air, unfinished. Carla knew better than to try to fill the silence with empty reassurance. Instead, she walked to the kitchen, pulled out the flour, eggs, and milk, and called over her shoulder, Come show me how you made those pancakes last year. Ava's eyes widened. She hesitated, then followed. Noah joined moments later, climbing onto a stool and taking the whisk without being asked. The kitchen warmed, not just from the stove, but from the laughter that bubbled up as flour dusted their shirts and syrup stuck to their fingers. It was a small rebellion against the pattern of their days. Carla took a photo with her phone and printed it later that night with the old office printer. She taped it to the fridge. The next morning, it was gone. She found it in Ava's backpack. At school drop-off the following Tuesday, Carla noticed that the other children ran to their parents with news, drawings, snack requests. Ava and Noah walked in side by side, silent. A few kids waved. They didn't wave back. When Carla picked them up that afternoon, Vanessa having double-booked a meeting, Ava held a drawer in her hand but didn't show it. Did you make that in art class? Carla asked. Ava nodded but didn't elaborate. Later, when Carla unpacked Ava's bag, she found the drawing. It was at a tall, empty house with 2 small figures on the bottom floor and 4 windows showing blank rooms above them. On the side, Ava had written, This house is big but not full. The words struck Carla harder than she expected. That evening, the children asked if they could eat in the kitchen instead of the dining room. Carla agreed. She served their meals on the old wooden table near the back door, where the light was soft and natural. Noah told her about a math game he liked. Ava talked about a girl who braided her hair at recess. It wasn't much, but it was something. After dinner, Ava asked, Do you think if we weren't here they'd notice? Carla paused, then answered honestly, I think it'd take them a while. But yes, they'd notice. People always do, eventually. Ava nodded slowly. I hope it doesn't take too long. The next day, Carla tried a new approach. She left notes for the parents, small observations written without accusation. Today, Noah helped me fold laundry and told me about his favorite rocket. Ava drew a house with flowers in front. She said she wants to live somewhere warm when she grows up. She left the notes on the edge of the kitchen counter, near where Vanessa usually placed her sunglasses. By the end of the week, none had been mentioned, but none were in the trash either. One evening, as Carla was preparing tea, Jackson came into the kitchen and paused. He picked up one of the notes, Ava's house drawing, and read it silently. Did she say why she wants to live somewhere warm? He asked. Carla shook her head. She just smiled. He returned the note to the counter and left without another word. But that moment lingered. A flicker of something. Perhaps a seed. On Sunday, Carla found both children in the garden, barefoot in the grass. They were chasing butterflies again, just like weeks ago. But this time, Ava carried a small notebook and was sketching. Noah held out his arms, trying to catch one gently without scaring it. Carla watched them, letting the moment unfold without interruption. They didn't need rescue. They needed recognition, attention, affection, someone to remember the little things, because the little things for them meant everything. And while their parents remained distracted, Carla continued to see them every day, fully, clearly. By the time October settled in, the rhythm of the Sterling household had started to shift, but not in the ways that were immediately visible. From the outside, the estate still projected the same pristine calm. But inside, there was now a subtle thread of consistency that wrapped itself around 2 children who had long learned to live without one. That thread was Carla. It began without ceremony. One evening, after a particularly long day, Ava asked Carla if she could stay until they fell asleep. Carla sat in the hallway with a book and a lamp, just outside their room. The light stayed on until both children's breathing was even and deep. The next night, they didn't ask, but Carla stayed anyway. She kept the book closed in her lap and simply listened. The hallway became her watchtower. Eventually, Carla stopped leaving exactly when her shift ended. She lingered after hours, not out of obligation, but because something within her resisted walking away while the house still held so much silence. She started preparing little evening trays, milk, fruit, toast cut into shapes. She didn't ask if they wanted them. She just left them on the table beside their beds and found them empty in the morning. One Monday, Noah came into the kitchen and asked her, with wide eyes and hesitation in his voice, "Can we bake something?" Carla blinked. "Now!" He nodded, "Just something little." They baked banana muffins with too much sugar and not enough flour. The kitchen was a mess of sticky bowls and smeared butter. Ava wandered in halfway through and joined without saying anything. When Vanessa entered, already on a call, she paused briefly at the doorway, looked at the scene, then continued walking without comment. That was the first night in a long, while the children didn't ask Carla to read before bed. They fell asleep on their own, the smell of muffins still lingering in their blankets. On Wednesday, Noah came down with a cold. Carla wrapped him in a blanket and sat with him on the sofa, watching cartoons. Ava sat at the table doing homework, occasionally glancing over. When Vanessa finally came downstairs that afternoon, she noticed the scene and said, "I'll call the doctor if he still looks bad tomorrow." Then she left for her meeting. Carla stayed the entire afternoon. She fed Noah soup and took notes on his symptoms. By the end of the evening, he had regained a bit of color. Before bed, he looked up at her and whispered, "I think I got better because you stayed." The next day, Ava handed Carla a drawing she had made during art class. It was of their living room, drawn from memory, but the only person in it was Carla, sitting with Noah on the couch. Above her, Ava had written, "Here's where we feel okay." Carla folded the paper carefully and kept it in her apron pocket. After that, moments like these began to bloom naturally. Carla helped with homework when the tutors failed to arrive. She started reading Ava's favorite mystery series during lunch breaks, so they could discuss the plot together. She learned the exact temperature Noah liked his tea and the way he liked to cut his sandwiches. She wasn't replacing anyone. She was simply filling the gaps that had long been ignored. One evening, Jackson returned early from a trip and walked into the family room to find Carla, Ava, and Noah playing cards. The scene paused when he entered. Carla began to rise, but he shook his head. "Don't stop." He watched for a moment, then turned and left. No questions, no reprimands. On the following Sunday, Carla brought homemade empanadas for lunch. It wasn't part of her duties, just something she'd made that morning at her own home. Ava took one bite and asked, "Can you teach me?" Carla smiled. "Only if you're ready to get your hands messy." That afternoon turned into an impromptu cooking lesson. Dough covered the counters. Filling spilled from overstuffed pastries. Ava and Noah laughed. Actual laughter, not the muted version Carla had grown used to. Even Helena peeked in from the kitchen and smiled. For the first time in weeks, Carla heard music playing softly through the house. Not from the speakers, but from Ava's keyboard upstairs. Notes, halting and delicate, drifted down like a whisper hope. Carla didn't go up to comment. She simply stood in the hallway, closed her eyes, and listened. That evening, as Carla prepared to leave, Noah walked her to the door. "Will you be here tomorrow?" "Yes," she said. "Like always." He hesitated. "Even if we're boring?" Carla crouched down. "You're never boring." Ava joined him and added, "Even if we're quiet?" Carla looked at both of them. Even then, they nodded and went back upstairs. That night, she sat in her car for a long while before starting the engine, the house glowing softly in her rear-view mirror. She realized then that something fundamental had shifted, not just in the children, but in herself. She was no longer just a maid. She had become something else entirely, a quiet constant, a presence the children didn't question, only trusted. When she arrived the next morning, Noah greeted her at the door with a drawing. It was stick figures again, but this time there were 3 of them, One tall figure stood between the two smaller ones, holding their hands. Underneath, in blocky letters, Noah had written, "Carla is the middle," and for now, that was exactly where she needed to be. It was a crisp Tuesday morning when Vanessa Sterling found herself pausing in the doorway of the children's room. She had gone upstairs to grab a scarf in the hallway closet, but stopped when she heard quiet laughter, genuine, unforced, and unfamiliar in its tone. She leaned slightly forward and peeked in. Ava and Noah sat on the carpet between their beds, surrounded by open books and crayons. Carla knelt beside them, helping Noah draw the outline of a dinosaur, while Ava carefully colored a butterfly. The scene was simple, ordinary, but something about it unsettled Vanessa, not because it was wrong, but because it was foreign. The children didn't notice her. Carla did. Their eyes met for half a second. Then Vanessa turned and walked away. At breakfast, she watched her children from behind her cup of coffee. Ava hummed softly to herself while spreading jam on toast. Noah asked Carla, not Helena, for more orange juice. Vanessa waited for either of them to speak to her, to acknowledge her presence. But when the moment passed and both continued their meal with quiet satisfaction, she felt something she hadn't in a long time. The sensation of being out of place in her own kitchen. Later that afternoon, as Vanessa reviewed her calendar for the upcoming charity gala, she noticed a sticky note on the counter in a handwriting she didn't recognize. Noah's. "Thank you for letting Carla help with the muffins. They tasted like a hug." Vanessa stared at the note for a moment before moving it aside without comment, but she didn't throw it away. That evening, after her final call ended early, she passed by the living room expecting to find silence and a glowing television screen. Instead, she found Ava and Noah sitting on the floor again, this time working on a school project. Carla sat beside them, offering guidance but not leading. Vanessa hovered near the archway, unnoticed, until Noah said, "Carla, do you think Mom will want to see it?" Carla looked up. "Why don't you ask her?" Ava glanced toward the doorway and finally saw her mother standing there. Vanessa stepped inside. "What are you working on?" Noah held up a cardboard model. "It's our dream house." Vanessa approached slowly. The house was crude, made of shoe boxes and paper cutouts. But what struck her wasn't the structure. It was the details. The labels. One room read, "Reading time with someone." Another said, "Dinner together." There was a garden labeled, "Talking spot." Vanessa crouched. These are very specific. Ava spoke without lifting her head. "It's what we want more of." Vanessa swallowed hard. "That's a good dream." Noah offered the smallest of smiles. "You can help us build it if you want." The next morning, Vanessa lingered in the kitchen longer than usual. Carla was making the children's lunches, cutting apples into star shapes the way Noah liked. Vanessa cleared her throat. "You're good with them," she said quietly. Carla didn't pause her slicing. "They're good kids." Vanessa shifted her weight. "They seem different lately. Calmer." Carla nodded. Children respond to presence. Vanessa looked away, her jaw tightening. "We've had a busy year." "I know." Vanessa took a deep breath, then added, "Thank you for being steady." Carla simply nodded and placed the finished lunches into their bags. Later that week, Jackson returned home early from a conference. He usually entered the house in a rush, distracted, barking instructions, or already on a call. But this time, he paused when he stepped through the door. The house wasn't silent. He heard soft piano music drifting from upstairs. He followed the sound and found Ava playing the keyboard in the attic. Not the grand piano downstairs, but the small one hidden in the corner beneath a slanted window. Carla sat nearby, folding laundry. Noah sat on the floor with a book. Jackson watched for a moment. No one noticed him. The music stopped when Ava saw his reflection in the window. She turned. "Hi, Dad." He stepped in. "That was beautiful. Just something Carla taught me," she said. He looked at Carla, then at the room, the relaxed posture of the children, the soft hum of comfort he couldn't remember the house ever holding before. He didn't know what to say, so he simply nodded. That evening, over dinner, Jackson sat at the table with the children. Carla had made vegetable soup and bread. Vanessa joined them a few minutes late, phone in hand, but set aside without being prompted. For several minutes, no one spoke. Then Ava said, "Did you know that whales can talk to each other from really far away?" Jackson looked up, surprised. "I did not." "They sing. It's called a song," she said. "I read about it." "Maybe that's what we need," he said. "A whale song, to stay connected." Noah giggled. "We could all learn to sing." Vanessa smiled faintly. "I'd need a lot of practice." The conversation moved on, slow, clumsy, but real. After dinner, Jackson lingered in the hallway and called Carla into his study. She stepped inside, unsure what to expect. He closed the door behind her. "They're different. Better." Carla nodded. He leaned against the edge of his desk. "Why?" "They feel safe," she said simply. "They feel seen." Jackson was quiet for a long time. "I used to read to them," he said suddenly. Ava's favorite was the one with the lighthouse. "She told me," Carla replied. He looked at her. "You remind them of what it's like to be heard. That matters." Carla didn't respond. She didn't need to. Jackson nodded slowly. "I think I forgot how much I used to matter to them, too." Carla left the study without another word. She returned to her room and sat on the edge of her bed, uncertain if the moment she just witnessed would lead to anything lasting. But something had shifted. A beginning. The Sterlings weren't suddenly transformed, but they were noticing. And sometimes that was the first crack in the wall. The next day, when Carla entered the kitchen, she found 2 lunch notes sitting on the counter, written in Jackson's sharp handwriting. One said, "Ava, I'm proud of your music." The other read, "Noah, let's build something this weekend. Just us." Carla folded them gently and placed one in each lunchbox. It was still early, but the silence was beginning to lift. The morning of Noah's birthday began like any other at the Sterling household. The sun slipped through the kitchen windows, casting golden stripes across the white tile. Carla arrived early as usual and began preparing breakfast. As she laid out the ingredients, she noticed a calendar pinned to the side of the pantry. It was cluttered with events, business trips, and appointment reminders scribbled in Vanessa's elegant handwriting. At the bottom corner of the current week, one word stood out in purple ink, written in block letters by a small, hopeful hand: Noah. Carla's stomach sank. There were no balloons, no wrapped gifts on the table, no plans written on the family whiteboard. The only person who had remembered was the person it mattered most to, Noah himself. Ava came into the kitchen first. She moved more slowly than usual and opened the fridge without speaking. Carla approached her gently. "You know what today is, right?" Ava nodded. He didn't want to talk about it this morning. "Why not?" "Because he already knew they forgot." Carla didn't need to ask who they were. By the time Noah came down, dressed in his uniform and rubbing his eyes, Carla had already made a decision. She had no party hats, no candles, no themed decorations, but she had flour, sugar, eggs, and butter. And more importantly, she had the time and intention. After the children left for school, Carla began baking. She found an old bundt pan in one of the drawers, cleaned it thoroughly, and began mixing the ingredients for a small vanilla cake with chocolate chips, Noah's favorite combination. While it baked, she set 2 plates at the kitchen table and placed the paper flowers she made from a napkin between them. She had no gifts, but she found a blank card in a drawer and wrote inside, "You matter, always." The smell of the cake filled the kitchen long before it was done. Helena passed by and sniffed the air. "What's the occasion?" "Noah's birthday," Carla said. Helena frowned. "Is it?" Carla nodded. Helena's expression shifted, and she said nothing more before walking away. By the time Ava and Noah returned from school, the cake had cooled. Carla had lit 2 small tea candles, no birthday candles in the house, and placed the card beside the cake on the table. She didn't say anything at first. She simply waited for them to see it. When Noah entered the kitchen and caught the scent, his eyes went wide. Then he saw the setup. "Is this for me?" Carla smiled. "Happy birthday." Ava touched his arm. "I told her about the chocolate chips." Noah stood frozen for a moment. Then, without a word, He walked over and hugged Carla tightly around the waist. His small hands clenched the back of her apron, and his face pressed into her side. Carla placed a hand gently on his back. "You didn't think I'd forget, did you?" Noah pulled away, wiping at his eyes with the back of his sleeve. "I just didn't think anyone would remember." They sat together and shared the cake. Ava insisted on singing, even if it was just the three of them. Noah smiled through most of it, his voice cracking once when he whispered, "Thank you," between bites. Carla said little. The children did all the talking, about school, about Ava's art class, about a strange kid named Brendan who made fart noises with his armpit. Laughter filled the room, soft and real. The silence broke later that evening when Jackson came home just after dinner. His tie was askew, his face tired. He stepped into the kitchen to pour himself a drink and froze mid-step when he saw the remnants of the celebration. The cake plate with crumbs, the card folded neatly on the table, the 2 tea candles now extinguished. He glanced at Carla. "What's this?" Carla met his eyes. Noah's birthday. Jackson went still. He looked around the kitchen, then back at her. "That's the day?" "Yes." He swore under his breath, then rubbed his forehead. "No one told me." Carla didn't answer. She only looked down at the card, then returned to washing the dishes. Jackson hovered in the doorway for a few seconds longer before walking out. The click of his office door echoed through the hallway. Later that night, Vanessa arrived home with 2 shopping bags in hand. She stopped short when she saw the empty cake plate. "Did we have guests?" Carla shook her head. It was Noah's birthday. Vanessa froze. "No one told me," she said, her voice low. He wrote it on the calendar. Vanessa opened a pantry door and looked. The note was there, purple ink, clear as day. She closed the door gently. Was he upset? Carla didn't soften the truth. He expected it. That's the worst part. Vanessa stood still for a moment, then quietly left the kitchen. In the children's room, Noah was already in bed when Jackson knocked and entered. He sat at the edge of the mattress, uncomfortable. "I'm sorry," he said. Noah looked at the ceiling. "It's okay." "No, it's not," Jackson admitted. "I forgot." "That's not okay." Noah turned to face him. "You used to tell me when I was born. You'd say it like a story." Jackson blinked. "You remember that?" "Yeah." There was silence. "I miss that," Noah added. Jackson nodded slowly. "So do I." Ava listened from the next bed, pretending to be asleep. She didn't say a word, but she felt something shift in the air. Downstairs, Vanessa stared at her reflection in the hallway mirror. Her phone buzzed with a notification. She turned it over and placed it face down on the table. The next morning, Carla found a new addition to the kitchen, a note from Vanessa in loopy cursive. "Thank you for remembering what we forgot." Beside it was a small wrap box. Carla opened it to find a ceramic angel figurine holding 2 children. That day, while Carla cleaned the living room, she overheard Vanessa on the phone with her assistant. "Cancel the event Friday night," she said. "Family night. No exceptions." Noah's birthday had come and gone, but it had left a mark, not in grand gestures, but in awareness. And sometimes awareness was the beginning of everything. The change was not immediate, nor loud. It began, as most real changes do, in the quiet. The Monday following Noah's birthday, the Sterling home felt different. Not transformed, not warm exactly, but less indifferent. A subtle current ran beneath each exchange. A pause here, a glance there. Carla noticed in how Vanessa lingered at the breakfast table for an extra 5 minutes, stirring her coffee more than drinking it, her eyes occasionally drifting toward her children rather than her phone. Jackson, though absent that morning, had left a note in each of the children's lunch boxes. Ava's read, "I'm proud of your music." Noah simply said, "You make the world brighter." The children didn't announce their reactions. They folded the notes carefully and slipped them into their pockets. But the way they carried themselves that day, shoulders less hunched, voices a touch louder, told Carla more than any words could. That afternoon, something unusual happened. Jackson returned from the city and, instead of locking himself away in his office, called Carla into the study. She entered cautiously, unsure of what tone to expect. He gestured for her to sit. "I want to talk to you," he said, his voice quieter than usual. "Not as staff, just as someone who knows my kids better than I do." Carla nodded once, hands folded in her lap. "I missed Noah's birthday," he said plainly. "I missed a lot more than that." Carla said nothing. Jackson leaned forward, elbows on his desk. "What do they need? I mean truly need. Not more toys or school trips. Just something I can give them." Carla met his eyes and replied simply, "More what money can't buy." He looked down at his hands. "Time. Attention. Yes. And presence. Not just being in the room. Being with them." He nodded slowly. "That's harder than I thought it would be." "It always is," Carla said. "But they still look for you. That's the part that makes it worth trying." Jackson sat back and was silent for a while. That evening, just after dinner, Carla was cleaning up the kitchen when she heard laughter, not polite or restrained, but bright and full. She dried her hands and walked to the hallway. In the living room, she saw Jackson sitting on the floor with Noah, a book open between them. Ava was curled up on a couch nearby, watching with a half smile. Jackson was reading aloud, voices and all, and Noah's face was lit with wonder. Vanessa stood by the doorway, arms crossed but not closed off, watching her husband with a mix of confusion and affection. Later that night, as Carla passed by the children's room, she heard Ava whisper, "Do you think he'll read to us again tomorrow?" Noah answered he said he would. Ava sounded skeptical, but he said things before. Noah replied, "It was different this time." The next day, Vanessa came down to breakfast without her phone. She sat at the table, poured her own coffee, and asked the children about their school projects. They answered cautiously at first, then with growing confidence as she continued listening. Carla noticed her nodding along, smiling even when she didn't quite understand the details. By midweek, a new pattern emerged. The family began eating dinner together more often. At first it was awkward, filled with long pauses and forced topics. But then, gradually, the conversations began to grow legs. Ava talked about her music. Noah spoke about a classmate who could balance pencils on his nose. Jackson contributed stories from his work travels, toned down and edited, but sincere. Vanessa occasionally laughed, really laughed, and once even spilled water on herself mid-sip. The children giggled, and no one told them to quiet down. One Friday night, Vanessa sat on the carpet with Ava doing puzzles. Jackson was reading to Noah in the armchair. Carla, walking past the doorway with a basket of laundry, paused. She wasn't needed in that moment, and for the first time, she felt that not needing to step in was a victory. That weekend, the family went to the park. It wasn't a planned outing. Carla had mentioned the weather would be nice, and Noah had asked, almost as a joke, "Could we go fly kites?" Jackson said yes before Carla could answer. Vanessa surprisingly agreed. They didn't have kites, so they bought two from a nearby store, bright colors, simple designs. Carla watched from a bench as the Sterlings, dressed in casual clothes, ran across the grass trying to catch the wind. Ava's kite soared first, and she hooped so loudly that nearby families turned to look. Noah struggled at first, but Jackson knelt beside him, guiding his hands. The kite took off, and Noah yelled, "I did it!" Jackson lifted him off the ground in a hug. Carla smiled to herself, her chest tight with something that felt both proud and sad. When they returned home, the kids were covered in grass stains and smiles. Vanessa made hot chocolate. Jackson built a fire in the living room. They watched a movie together. Carla didn't join but passed by several times, quietly ensuring snacks were restocked. Blankets were within reach. That night, as she gathered dishes in the kitchen, Vanessa stepped in. "I didn't realize how much we were missing," she said. Carla looked up from the sink. "You're seeing it now. That's what matters." Vanessa hesitated, then asked, "Do you think we've done too much damage?" Carla shook her head. "No. Children remember kindness longer than absence. You're building again. Just keep showing up." Vanessa nodded slowly. "Thank you for all of it." Carla returned her attention to the dishes. Later that week, Noah handed Carla a folded note as he left for school. She opened it after they had gone. Inside, in large, uneven handwriting, it read, "You helped them find their way back." She folded the note and placed it beside the one Ava had given her weeks ago. The Sterling home wasn't healed, not completely, but it had turned. The cold, echoing quiet was being replaced. Not quickly, not perfectly, but steadily with warmth, presence, and a delicate rebuilding of something close to love. By the beginning of November, the rhythm of life inside the Sterling household had settled into something that resembled a home. It wasn't flawless. It wasn't always easy, but it was real. The sharp edges of silence had softened into something gentler, a kind of intentional presence that could only come from repeated effort. For the first time since she had started working there, Carla noticed that the children no longer glanced nervously toward the hallway when a door opened. They no longer froze mid-sentence, anticipating interruption. Instead, they spoke freely, sometimes even arguing, the way siblings do when they know someone will still be listening at the end. What began with single moments, Jackson reading stories at night, Vanessa asking simple questions at breakfast, had evolved into new habits. Phones were left on silent during meals. Meetings were scheduled after bedtime, not during. Carla saw it in the way Noah would lean against his father's arm at dinner, or how Ava now waited to walk to school with her mother instead of darting out the door ahead of her. It wasn't about perfection. It was about effort. And the effort was beginning to bloom. One Monday morning, Carla entered the kitchen to find Vanessa already there, sleeves rolled up, slicing strawberries. She paused in the doorway. Vanessa glanced at her. "Noah said he liked the ones you made with sugar and lemon. I'm trying to get it right." Carla stepped forward. "He'll like it either way." Vanessa smiled, faint but real. "I hope so." That same afternoon, Jackson arrived early and offered to pick the children up from school himself. When the black SUV pulled into the driveway, Carla watched in the front windows as Noah burst from the back seat and jumped onto his father's leg. Clinging to him with delight, Jackson bent to pick him up, carrying him into the house as Ava walked beside them, beaming. Dinner that evening wasn't extravagant. Roasted chicken, mashed potatoes, and green beans, but it was shared. Carla prepared everything as usual, but this time she was invited to sit. She declined gently, choosing instead to watch in the kitchen archway as the family passed plates, traded stories, and laughed over Ava's impression of her math teacher. After the dishes were cleared, Vanessa brought out a board game that hadn't been touched in years. The rules were slightly bent, points forgotten, but the laughter was loud and genuine. Noah cheated. Ava caught him. Jackson pretended not to notice. Carla, standing in the hallway, folded a dish towel and smiled to herself. The children began to change in subtle ways. Noah was more confident. He spoke up at the dinner table, volunteered to help with chores, and no longer asked if Carl would stay after bedtime, because now, more often than not, one of his parents stayed instead. Ava started playing music again, not just for herself, but for others. She invited Vanessa to listen, asked her to pick songs, even taught her a simple melody. One Saturday morning, Ava and Carla were planting flower bulbs in the side garden when Vanessa stepped outside in boots and gloves. "May I help?" she asked. Ava nodded without hesitation. They worked in silence for a while, hands in the soil, the air filled with the scent of earth and the occasional chirp of birds. Carla stepped back, letting the mother and daughter move together, side by side, digging and planting. After an hour, they stood to stretch, dirt smudged on their cheeks and under their fingernails. "I forgot how good this feels," Vanessa said. "Doing something that takes time." Ava smiled. "It's like a slow surprise." That afternoon, the children sat at the kitchen table writing letters for a school assignment. Notes of gratitude for someone who had helped them recently. Ava wrote hers to Jackson, thanking him for building a bookshelf with her over the weekend. Noah hesitated for a long time before putting pen to paper. When Carla walked by, he smiled and quickly hid the note behind his arm. "Top secret," he said. She didn't press him. 2 days later, Jackson handed her an envelope during breakfast. "This is yours," he said. "Noah wanted me to give it to you." Inside was a folded sheet of paper with block letters, spelling out, "Thank you for being our calm when everything felt loud." Carla kept that note with the others. Changes continued in small, steady ways. The television in the family room was turned off more often. Music filled the house instead. Sometimes Ava's keyboard, sometimes soft jazz from Vanessa's playlist, sometimes Noah singing under his breath while brushing his teeth. Jackson started cooking breakfast once a week, badly, but with intention. Pancakes were often burned, eggs too runny, but the children ate every bite with exaggerated praise. One evening, while organizing the pantry, Carla overheard a conversation from the living room. "Jackson, I missed all of this." "Vanessa, we almost didn't notice we were missing it." "Jackson, we're lucky Carla did." "Vanessa, we still are." Carla paused, hidden behind a shelf of spices, and allowed herself to exhale deeply. The next morning, Ava came to breakfast carrying a small jar. "It's for our wishes," she announced. "We each get to write one thing we want this week." Noah dropped his into the jar immediately. "Build a fort." Vanessa's read, "Dance in the kitchen again." Jackson added, "Finish a bedtime book from start to end." Carla was handed a slip of paper. She hesitated, then wrote, "May this continue." No one asked what she meant, but somehow they all understood. By the end of the week, the living room had a blanket fort. The kitchen echoed with clumsy footsteps and laughter, and Jackson finished reading the final chapter of the book they'd started months ago. He closed it, looked at Ava and Noah, and said, "Same one next week?" They nodded. It wasn't the house that had changed. It was the people inside it. The walls still stood, the routine still existed. But now, within those routines, there was intention, presence, and care. Carla saw in the way the children looked at their parents, not with fear or hesitation, but with hope, and perhaps, even more importantly, with trust. It wasn't a perfect transformation. There were still late meetings and missed moments, but now they were acknowledged, not buried. And each time something slipped, someone tried again. And that, Carla knew, made all the difference. November faded into December with an early snowfall that coated the trees and walkways around the Sterling estate in layers of delicate white. For the first time in years, the mansion felt appropriately dressed for winter, not just on the outside, but within. There was warmth inside the walls now, the kind that didn't come from fireplaces or heating vents, but from shared moments, laughter, and the growing rhythm of reconnection. The change in the Sterling family had not been sudden, but as the days passed, it had become undeniable. Carla noticed that her role had begun to shift in subtle but meaningful ways. She still prepared meals, cleaned rooms, and folded laundry, but more often she found herself stepping back while others stepped in. Where once she filled silences and softened sharp edges, now she simply stood nearby, offering support when needed, but no longer serving as a glue holding everything together. One quiet Sunday morning, as Carla stood in the kitchen preparing tea, Noah walked in, his hair still messy from sleep. "You think you'll always work here?" he asked, climbing onto the stool beside the counter. Carla smiled. "Why do you ask?" "I don't know. Just wondering." "You don't have to stay if you don't want to, but I hope you do." Carla placed a mug in front of him. "I like being here. But the good thing is, even if I ever leave, what we built together stays." Noah thought about this. "Like a tree?" "Exactly. You don't see the roots, but they keep growing." He nodded, sipping his tea carefully. That week, Vanessa invited Carla to join the family on a trip to a holiday market downtown. "Only if you want to," she added. "But we like you there." It wasn't an order or a suggestion. It was a genuine invitation. Carla agreed. They walked to the rows of wooden stalls together, the children tugging their parents' hands towards sweets, toys, and handmade trinkets. Jackson bought hot cider for everyone, and Vanessa let Ava pick out a knitted scarf. At one point, Noah spotted a small ornament shaped like a locket and whispered to Carla, "It looks like the one my mom used to wear before everything got busy." Carla leaned down. Maybe it's time to give her another. That evening, Ava helped Vanessa wrap presents, and Jackson helped Noah build a wooden sleigh from a kit they picked up at the market. Carla stepped outside for a moment, watching the glow of the lights through the window, snow drifting gently past the glass. The house looked almost like a painting. Something soft, layered with years, now coming into focus. Inside, things continued to shift. At dinner, the conversations came more easily. Ava started telling jokes she made up herself, and Noah began keeping a funny notebook filled with silly thoughts and doodles. Jackson, who had once spoken mostly in meetings and travel plans, now shared childhood stories that made the children laugh, and Vanessa smiled with surprise. One afternoon, Carla returned from grocery shopping to find the children at the dining table working on homemade cards. Colored paper, markers, and glue sticks were scattered across the table. Ava held up a nearly finished card. "We're making thank you notes for people we love." Carla asked, "May I see?" Ava turned the card around. On the front was a drawing of the kitchen, with stick figures sitting at the table. Inside, in Ava's careful handwriting, it read, "Thank you for being the one who reminded us we were worth noticing." Carla didn't say anything. She simply hugged her. Later, when the children were upstairs, Vanessa entered the kitchen with a photo album. "Carla," she said softly, "can I show you something?" They sat at the table together. Vanessa opened the album to a page of old photos, some from the early years of marriage, others from when Ava was a baby. "I stopped adding to this after Noah turned 2, Vanessa said, tracing one of the images. "I think I convinced myself that the busier we were, the better life was. I didn't realize how far away I drifted." Carla glanced at her, waiting. "I didn't want to admit it," Vanessa continued. "But you didn't judge us. You didn't accuse. You just kept showing up. And the kids saw that. We all did." Carla replied gently, "Sometimes presence is all someone needs to remember how to be themselves again." Vanessa closed the album. "You gave us more than help. You gave us back the parts we didn't know we'd lost." That evening, when Carla brought the folded laundry into the children's room, she found them making a list together on Ava's bed. "What's that?" she asked. "It's a list of everything we want to keep doing," Noah said, "even after the holidays." Ava added, "like family dinners, Saturday game nights, and walks in the park." "Music time," said Noah, "and making things with our hands." Carla smiled. "That's a good list." Ava looked up. "We added one more at the bottom. It just says Carla, because we want to keep you too." Carla knelt beside the bed. "Then I'll stay as long as you need me." That night, Vanessa came to tuck them in. She brushed Ava's hair from her forehead and kissed Noah's cheek. It was a quiet moment, unannounced, but it settled into the room like the final note of a lullaby. Carla stood in the hallway afterward, unseen. Jackson joined her, leaning against the doorframe. "She's trying," he said. "She is. So am I." "I know." He looked at her. "Thank you." "You don't have to thank me," she said. "Just keep going." As December deepened, the home grew softer, steadier. The children still looked for Carla, still ran to her with their thoughts and creations, but they also reached more freely for their parents. What had begun as a fragile reconnection had matured into something more resilient. The presence Carla had brought remained, but now it was shared, multiplied, even. It existed not just in the quiet acts of care she had offered, but in the new habits the Sterlings had chosen to maintain, and that, she knew, was the truest sign of healing. The first snow of December had already melted, and the second had begun to fall. By the time the holidays arrived, the Sterling home glowed not just with lights and candles, but with something deeper, an internal warmth built over weeks of small, deliberate choices. The house, once cold despite its beauty, now pulsed with activity, conversation, and the irreplaceable rhythm of presence. Carla, though still fulfilling her daily tasks, had become something more than any job description could define. She had become a fixture of stability, a quiet guardian not just of order, but of emotional truth. On the evening before Christmas Eve, the Sterling family gathered around the long oak dining table. No guests, no decorators, no formalities, just the 5 of them. And for the first time, it truly felt like 5. Ava had placed hand-drawn name cards at each seat. Noah had helped bake cookies, half of which had burned, but none of which were left untouched. Vanessa and Jackson had wrapped presents themselves, something neither had done in years. Carla stood by the kitchen entrance, apron dusted with flour, watching them. It was her favorite place now, Not in the center, but at the edges, where she could see clearly and act when needed without being the focus. "Carla, come sit with us," Jackson said, rising slightly from his chair. She shook her head with a smile. "I'm fine here." "No," Ava insisted. "You have to sit. It's not the same without you." Noah ran to her and took her hand. "Please." Carla hesitated. Then she untied her apron, washed her hands, and joined them. As she sat down, Vanessa raised a glass of cider. "Before we eat, I'd like to say something." Everyone quieted. Vanessa glanced around the table. "I spent a long time thinking I had to build a perfect life. I thought that meant success, reputation, beautiful things. I forgot what it actually means to have a home." Carla reminded us. Jackson nodded. "She did more than that. She reminded us how to be a family again." Ava stood suddenly and clinked her spoon against her glass, clearing her throat. "I wrote something," she said. "Just a little thing." She unfolded a piece of paper, then paused. Her voice shook at first, but then she steadied. "This is for Carla. You came to us when our house was full, but our hearts were quiet and still. You noticed what we didn't see, and taught us how to feel. You baked and folded, swept and cared. But that's not what we'll recall. We'll remember the nights you sat with us, when no one else heard our call. You didn't fix us with grand ideas, or force our hands to change. You stayed. You watched. You listened well, and gave us gentle range. Now we laugh and sing and sit together, because of what you gave. Not gifts or things or fancy plans, but love that helped us brave. So thank you, Carla, for all the light, for every unseen fight. You are the reason we believe. That quiet love is might." By the time Ava finished reading, the room was still. Vanessa wiped her eyes. Jackson looked down at his plate. Noah clapped softly, then leaned into Carla's arm. Carla cleared her throat and said quietly, "You didn't need fixing. You only needed time, and someone to believe in the goodness you already had." The rest of the evening unfolded with laughter, games, and stories. At one point, Jackson took out the old photo albums, and for the first time, the children saw pictures of their parents in messy, joyful moments. Camping trips, burnt breakfast, snowball fights in college courtyards. Ava asked questions. Noah pointed out resemblances. Vanessa told stories she hadn't remembered in years. Late that night, as the children headed off to bed, Carla helped clean the last of the dishes. Vanessa stood beside her, drying a tray. "You know," Vanessa said, "at first I thought we hired a maid, but what we found was something closer to a guide." Carla smiled. "I just stayed long enough for you to see what you already had." Vanessa nodded. "Still, you didn't have to, but you did." They worked quietly for a few more minutes. When everything was done, Vanessa took a small box on the counter and handed it to her. "It's not big, but it's from all of us." Carla opened it and found a gold bracelet, thin and simple. Engraved inside were the words, "You are the calm." She ran her fingers over the engraving and whispered, "Thank you." The next morning, Christmas Eve dawned soft and white. Carla arrived early as usual, but the house was already awake. The children were making breakfast with their parents, the kitchen full of clatter and music. They didn't notice her at first, and for a moment, Carla stood in the entryway, watching the scene unfold. No one was shouting. No one was rushing. It was imperfect, noisy, and full. She turned to hang up her coat and caught a glimpse of herself in the hallway mirror. The woman staring back wasn't just a maid. She was a witness, a companion, a quiet hero in a house that had learned to breathe again. That evening, as the family gathered around the fire, Ava handed her another small envelope. Inside was a folded paper with one simple sentence, written in Noah's crooked handwriting. "Now we know what home feels like." Carla looked up and saw the family watching her, not with expectation, but with gratitude. Real, deep, lasting gratitude. She placed a note in her pocket beside all the others. Outside, snow fell silently. Inside, a family sat together, mended not by force or fortune, but by something much simpler. Presence. As the fire crackled and laughter filled the room, Carla leaned back in her chair, knowing her role was complete. not as a rescuer, not as a savior, but as someone who saw a need, stayed long enough to meet it, and helped others remember how to love out loud again. And in that quiet, steady knowing, there was peace.